Aloha everyone, and welcome to another video by me, K. Elmer, and in this video I'd like to share with you my go-to electro healing technique that I use whenever I am sick or whenever my daughter is sick, and it is called blood electrification, and that's exactly what it does. It's literally passing electricity through your bloodstream, and the effects of doing that are very remarkable. And let's get into that detail here. First, obviously, there's some disclaimers. Clearly, this is not medical advice. I'm not here to treat or diagnose or anything like that. This video is about a technique that literally has been going for decades, and this is the history and the background, the patents, and basically how you do it, where you can get these devices and so forth. It is not medical advice. So from that, I'd like to also let you know that I'm going to do a little bit of a different format of my videos because there's such a wealth of information already been documented about this topic. I thought it'd be kind of like, you know, a little pointless to kind of reinvent the wheel when there's so much information already on blood electrification. So I'd rather just walk you through a summary, high-level cliff notes, not force you to watch a 1-hour video, but just kind of say, hey, this is what it's all about. How do you do it? Where to find it? And then you guys can, you know, I'll give you all the links and everything in the video description, walk you through the various websites, tell you everything I know, if I can remember to say it. You know, these are non-scripted, and just I just wanted to share, and that's what I do. I share what I know, and I thought you might find this interesting if you've never heard about this technique. So let's just jump right in to the information here, okay, about the story of blood electrification. Now, this story right here is on a great website called educateyourself.org, and it is this is a great website to learn about a lot of other things. But in specific to blood electrification, I mean, it's like I said earlier, it is absolutely not a new thing. The idea of using electricity to try to heal, you know, any type of organisms, up to including humans, has been around for over 100 years. You can go back and find all sorts of different machines and technology that was created at the end of the 18th century, and that people were trying to figure out, you know, how could electricity help people. And since then, like I said in my last video, I mean, you go into a hospital today and there's tons of different devices that are electrical devices that are used in the healing arts. But to this specific one, it was kind of, there's lots of older patents, all sorts of different types of equipment, but it never really popped up onto the scene of, oh, let's try this out and let's really get into this. Until a couple of scientists at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York back in the fall of 1990, and I'm not going to get into all of this, you can read this yourself obviously, but when these two guys did a lot of experiments and they came out with a modality, they came out with results from their experiments that indicated that when you basically put electricity at 50 to 100 microamperes. Okay, that's really, really, really low power, and you put that and you run that through your basically blood, red blood cells, and they watch the blood under a microscope as they pass the current, and they were able to then find out that it literally would disable any type of living pathogen in the blood. And it wouldn't hurt the blood cells. So that was a major discovery, because they figured out exactly what they could do with electricity that would kill the bad bugs and leave you completely unharmed. Now that's pretty amazing. And so these guys came out with that in 1990, and a couple of years later they put out a patent, and here's the patent right here, US 5139684A, called Electrically Conductive Methods and Systems for Treatment of Blood and Other Fluids or Synthetic Fluids with Electric Forces. Okay, this is right there on Google Patents. You can look this up yourself. Now, what's very important about this is that it states right here in their patent exactly what the effects are, and again, I want to repeat this because it is really, really, really what the point is all about, blood electrification. And then you take that idea and you compare that to taking antibiotics and all of the problems and risks that go with taking antibiotics, and then you go, oh, wait a minute, you mean back in 1990, or especially, I guess this patent, what's the date on this puppy? Yeah, 1991 is when they applied for it, 1990, right? Way back then, that the scientists at the Albert Einstein Institute in New York had discovered a way to basically do what antibiotics do, which is some electricity and a little tiny box. We don't need to take antibiotics, maybe? See where I'm going with that. Okay, so here it is right here, and this is the abstract. New process and system for treatment of blood and or other body fluids, as I said, from a donor to recipient or storage receptacle. Now, this is how they did it, okay? This was 1990, and the way that they did it is they took the blood out of the person's body. Then they, basically zapped it with electricity, and then they put the blood back. And then the second way they did it was they figured out, let's put in some electrodes into the bloodstream, really tiny itty bitty electrodes, and then zap it from that way, right? And that was what the patent's all about, is basically doing it two different ways, inside and outside the body. Very invasive, but this was, remember now, this was the first one that was very specific to blood electrification. But what's really important, again, as I want to say, is that they were able to apply with electric field forces of appropriate electrical field strength to provide electric current flow through the blood or other body fluid at a magnitude that is biologically compatible but is sufficient to render the bacteria, viruses, and or fungus ineffective to infect normal healthy cells while maintaining biological usefulness of the blood and other body fluids. Okay, that's huge. That's huge. And so that's what these guys came up with. That's what the patent reads, and it's all there on the internet. And, this is not pseudoscience. This is science. these guys worked at the Albert Einstein Institute, all right? And so they came out with this patent, and about the same time enters a guy named Bob Beck, okay? And he's a doctor, but he's like an engineer doctor. And so those guys came up with a patent, but they never developed, like a commercial use type of activity. It never went mainstream medical or anything like that, as you know, because your doctors never mentioned it to you, right? But a guy named Dr. Bob Beck came along about a year later. He'd read an article in Science magazine about that patent, about those two guys, and he decided, because he was an electrical engineer, and he was really, just very adamant about trying to, I guess he's just one of those tinkers. I mean, he's one of those tinker guys, right? He decided, hey, I could build a little thing that does that, and he started he put together an idea where he could build a little box, a little type of device that could actually do it. But then his tweak was, and this is what his tink was that he decided, and he figured out that if you just put the probes right above where your blood is closest to the skin, that he could actually pass the electricity through the bloodstream from outside the body. So it was not invasive. And he could actually do it for, basically, like here's the actual handouts from his lectures back in 1990s, right? He did several lectures. They are on YouTube. You can watch it. But here's the actual handout. Somebody found it years ago, and then of course it's now made its way to the internet. But basically, his lecture was it was called "Take Back Your Power." That's what he would say. At the time, if you recall, if you're alive back then in the 90s, in the early 90s, 80s, right? HIV, right? AIDS was the big thing. It was like that's all everyone thought about and was afraid of. Here he came up with a simple electronic device that could basically help people with AIDS. It would help get rid of it. And he also was able to basically he actually did this as a thing. He used his own money to see if it would work. So he developed a device of his own. He spent his own money. If you listen to his lectures, he went out of the country because the FDA and everything wasn't going to allow him to do that. And so he went out of the country, spent a good deal of money, did a massive human trial using his device, and he discovered that it really works. You can do it outside the body for really, 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 really cheap, because these little devices didn't cost much to make. And that it did what it said it would do. It would just basically wipe out anything that was in your bloodstream that's not you. And because of that, and there's so many diseases and so many ailments and problems and things caused by pathogens in your blood that of course get throughout your body, especially HIV, HIV virus, right? That it was actually kind of helping people, and people were getting better from it. And so then once he got it figured out in his human trials, he came back to the country, and then he started lecturing about it, and this was his lecture handout. And then his lecture was attested, I'll read what he wrote. This is his document. Attested revolutionary but almost unbelievable medical discovery may enable rapid AIDS, Epstein-Barr, hepatitis, cancer, lupus, and other disease elimination. Total cost is like $1.32. This is back then per patient per remission of symptoms. Requires no doctors, surgery, drugs, diet, medical pills, shots, herbs, or outside intervention. This breakthrough, it sounds crazy, right? It sounds like pseudoscience, snake oil, but this breakthrough is now yours, despite apparent suppression by medical and pharmaceutical cartels. So there's a little bit of tinfoil hat here, because what does this mean? What does this actually mean? And it means that he kind of came up with a device that basically got people well from all of these things. It was super cheap, and he open sourced it and gave it to the world. He gave the plans away. He said, "Go build this yourself for $1." For the cost. He used to say, like, for a cost of a stick of gum, or or a 9-volt battery, you can have the ultimate tool in your med kit. It was one of his devices. And in the beginning, he actually had nothing for sale. When he would go to a lecture, he had nothing to sell. He wasn't developing these things. He developed it to test it, and there's that article in Science News. He developed to test it, but he gave away the schematic and told people to build them themselves. He did not build units. He just gave away how to do it. How to build your own unit, that's what this was a blood electrifier. He would give away the schematic. This is all like open source out there in the world. How to build it. Here's the parts list to build it. This is the schematic, if you can understand how to read it. And then his handout, and this is what his lecture would be, is he basically pulled a page out of Grey's Anatomy, and he would basically tell you, hey, you know what, you need to put, this is where you could put the probes. You could put the probes on either wrist, right there where your main artery is. You could put it on your leg where your main arterial artery on your leg is, or you can put it on both sides of the wrist. So there's 3 ways to put it on your leg. Both wrists or one wrist, right? And that's how the basic way to do it. And then, of course, he got into other areas of the body that, if you had to, let's say, if you were really adamant about trying to cure yourself of AIDS or other specific diseases that you had to do more than just blood electrification, he would also recommend that you do magnetic pulsing, which is PEMF, right? And you would use a pulsar, and that's getting into the actual Bob Beck protocol. Okay, so there's a difference between blood electrification, which is just electrifying your blood and killing off the bugs that are in your blood, and then there's the actual Bob Beck protocol. I want to do a video about that separately, because there's a lot more about it than just blood electrification. But that's blood electrification, okay? It was basically started in the early 90s, and thanks to the work and the tireless efforts of Dr. Bob Beck, who ran around the country and lectured on this, gave away all this information. People picked up the baton that he handed out, and they ran with it. And so from that point, there's been outcry. He basically passed away in 2002. Since that time, a lot of different people have been building his devices and using them. A lot of positive reports. So if you want to go to a YouTube page that's dedicated to Bob Beck, there's this website, actually. It's called bobbeck.com, and they have this website. It's an archive of all of his lectures, and you can listen to him and you can hear what he has to say back in the 90s, and you can also hear a bunch of testimonials from people that have used his devices, his specifically the blood electrifier. Okay, and so that's where you can learn a lot more about what he did and about his device. And then in terms of where to get one, this guy's named Russ, and he was actually one of Bob's, like in the later 1900s or 1990s. Sorry, he's not that old. He basically was one of his partners, and he actually then worked with Bob in Bob's later years, and he actually developed a commercial product. So Russ was the first one to actually put out a commercial product, and he actually appeared in one of Bob Beck's lectures before he passed away, when they started putting together the actual full-on protocol, which are other steps included into blood electrification. But just as blood electrification alone, Russ did take Bob Beck's schematic, and he created this little guy right here, which he calls the silver pulsar. So if you're actually wanted to try this and see if it works for you, then by all means, this is where you can get from the original design from the original individual that worked with Bob Beck. It's Russ, and he runs a company called SOTA up in Canada. And that's where you can get one of his devices. And then since that time, of course, there's other tinkers that have been taking the idea and the schematics that Bob put out that, you know, that meets the criteria of the patent, and actually does what the patent says it does. And so the other individuals that are out there where you can buy these electrifiers, there's one called Bioelectric, and these other individuals are located in other different countries, I think. And he actually makes and I have this unit myself. Actually, I do. I have the SOTA Silver Pulsar. I also have one of these. They're called the Dragonflies, and I actually have one of these. And this one actually takes into account not just the work of Beck, which is his world ran around 4 hertz. That was what his device did. But if you look into the 10 hertz world, that's the world of another lady called Hulda Clark, and that's a different vendor. And this is the other zapper. These are all different. They call them zappers or pulsars, right? And then this company right here is called Parazappers, and they also make Bob Beck electric blood electrifiers. Okay, so there's these are the 3 different manufacturers, and there's a 4th manufacturer, and this guy actually sells kits, and he also sells the completed device. And so and this website, there's a link below, right? This one is called Electronic Kit Complete, and this guy started out, I think his name is Bolzar, and he's a European guy, and he actually he initially started selling kits, and then he's now decided, and since then he actually creates his own box. And these are so I want to point out that the Silver Pulsar from SOTA, the Dragonfly Electrifier, the Parazapper, or the Bolazars, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but if this guy, okay, are probably the top 4 products out there. And beware, because, you know, as a tinkerer, I've bought a whole bunch of different ones. There was a company for a while there that disappeared called Silver Smoke Research, and I bought a bunch from them, and they worked great. But he doesn't make them anymore. Then I actually bought one from some other guy on eBay, and it arrived, and it was like the biggest piece of crap you'd ever imagine. Didn't work at all. So, you know, some people just don't know how to put these together, and some people do it for a living. This guy does it for a living. These guys do it for a living. That guy. So these are the 4 areas. If you want to try this out for yourself and see what it can do for you, there's where you should go and get one. Okay. Now, how to use a blood electrifier? You know, obviously, if you read, if you just read, Bob's basically, these are his instructions on how to use it. It's right here. You can read all about it, all the different placements. But there's a couple I'm going to link to them. A couple of really good videos by other tinkers that basically, like this guy talks about, and he demonstrates the 2 per wrist. 2 probes per wrist technique. Then there's this guy who created a video, and he basically shows how you do the one per wrist. So you see how that he does these 2, right? He puts 1 probe on each wrist. I've done it both ways, and I think, honestly, I'm going to get into what my experiences are, but from my experience, I think that the 2 wrists was more effective, and the reason being is when you do the 2 on 1 wrist, if you don't feel a pulse, then you're for whatever reason, your body's different. You got fat wrists or something. But if you can't feel your pulse, then that means there's too much of you between your skin and the probe and the bloodstream and the probe, right? You know what I mean, the probe. So it's really critical when you're doing this, and I've been doing this, like I said, well over a decade, that the probe has to be like within a millimeter or 2 of the bloodstream, the artery or the vein. It has to be there. And if you don't feel a pulse, then you're not going to get what I would consider, good contact. And so I've done it both, where I've had 2 on 1 wrist and then 1 on each one, and I find that I can feel the pulse. I can feel exactly where I should put it on 2 wrists as opposed to 1 wrist, where I can never find the second pulse point on 1 wrist. But either way, it works. And when I say it works, what I'd like to just say is, I'm just going to give you a couple of stories about it working. Here's that website, bobbeck.com. Great info. If you want to learn more, this is the website to go to. And then there's another website here, which is the Altered States, and they got a really great article about Bob Beck, about what he did and how it works and so forth. Of course, these guys sell product. and they're just, you know, they're selling stuff, and then these guys is just a nonprofit to get Dr. Bob Beck's work out there. So let me just talk to you real quick, trying to not make these videos too long, about my experiences using the Bob Beck Electrifier, because there's two things I want to point out. There's the Bob Beck Electrifier, right, which is the schematic and the device that he created, and that he figured out how to use it outside of the body so it's not invasive. And then there's the Bob Beck protocol. So over time, between 1990, early 1990, sorry, and then forward about 10 years or so, over time, Dr. Beck had discovered through his testing and continually use and refining of the schematic for the device, he basically figured out that initially, if you just do the blood electrification, it'd get rid of pathogens. And then he discovered that, some pathogens hide out in the very end of your nerve cells, and they hide in very, very tight places that the blood can't get to. I mean, not get to easily. And that's how he ended up with this diagram here, where he started doing magnetic pulsing. So he started with just blood electrification, and then he added on PEMF to get the rest of the areas that the blood couldn't get to, that he had pulsed the blood, but the viruses would hide. Viruses will hide. That's why, for those of you who ever had shingles or know someone who has shingles, that's essentially the chickenpox virus, but it hides in your body. If you ever get chickenpox, you never get rid of the virus. The virus is always going to stay in you, and it goes dormant in your nerve endings along the trunk of your body, on the sides, right? And that's why when you have a breakout of shingles, you're basically having a chickenpox outbreak on the sides of your body, and that's where the virus lives, right? And so in this world, for blood electrification, well, the same problem is that you could electrify your blood and bang out anything that's in you, like a flu virus or whatever virus, or, you know, molds, funguses, anything that's in there, bacteria. It'll just kill it all off. But the problem is that if it's like a chickenpox virus, you have to then pulse where you know these things hide. Sometimes they hide in the thyroid. Sometimes they hide all sorts of different areas of the body that basically, you know, his handout will go over and show you, you know, where else should you, you know, basically treat, so that you have blood electrification plus PEMF. And that was the beginning of the Bob Beck protocol. Okay, and then that's what he discovered. But as time grew on, this is like, you know, 30 years ago, then as time went on, he discovered, because of the effect of blood electroporation, which I talked about in my last video, but because of the effect of blood electroporation, not blood electrification, but just electroporation, when you pass any type of current through any type of living tissue, the cells will electroporate, it'll puff up, and they'll be able to increase their ability to absorb. Then he figured out that step 3 was, hey, let's put colloidal silver into the system. Then the silver can more easily, the silver ions can more easily penetrate cells and then kill any viruses or bacteriums that got inside the cell wall, and so the membrane, sorry. And so because of that, he added as step 3 colloidal silver, and then eventually step 4, he added ozone water, so that when you drink ozone water, then it releases oxygen into your body, and then because you've done some electrification and you've got ozone water in your body, and it releases an oxygen molecule, you know, an O1 actually, and, you know, through electroporation, oxygen gets into your cell and also kills anything inside the cell membrane. So that's the Bob Beck protocol. I guess I was going to talk about it. Sorry. Hey, you know, I don't know if anybody realizes, but I do all these in one take. So that's why I mumble a lot, but I just want to save time. My time and yours. So, Bob Beck, blood electrification. Okay? It is an amazing thing. For me, and I'm going to give you a couple of stories. One time, I was at a horse show. My daughter's an equestrian, and they forgot to water the arena, and all the parents got a 4-hour blast of fine silt sand into our faces during the horse show, and I ended up breathing in a lot of that sand. And you know what sand is? It's silica, and so it basically, I ended up with really bad bronchitis. Because all that silica was in my lungs, it was cutting me up on the inside, micro lesions. I was coughing blood, and I was on my road to pneumonia. And so I used the Bob Beck protocol. Sometimes, by the way, sometimes I just will do blood electrification and not do the rest of the stuff. You know, if it's not severe, if I just feel, I feel something coming on, I just put on the zapper and for a few hours, and that usually knocks it out. But if I get really bad like that, where I literally am like coughing blood, bronchitis kind of level, I'll do the Bob Beck protocol. I did it for like 3 days, and literally within a week. Actually, I did it the whole week, but within a week, I was just way better, and I didn't. I actually don't go to doctors. I just treat myself. So that's one incredible, story. That's a true story. Most recently, accidentally cut the tip of my finger off. Just like if you look at your finger, your ring finger, and kind of go back in about 4 millimeters, and then just slice that tip off. I did that, and I was just cooking, right? I was slicing up a steak or something. So most people would go to the ER. Like I said, I really don't like doctors, so I just put the tip back on. I cleaned everything up, put the tip back on, and then I just treated it with blood electrification, and I did the Bob Beck because I was really afraid of the infections I would get, which is the #1 cause of these kinds of problems. But basically, I fixed myself, and I just was electrifying every single day for like 2 weeks, and I made sure I did get a little bit of an infection, but I killed it right away. It never got bad, and it allowed my finger to reattach to my tip, and I fixed my finger. That's another, and I did that, and I never went to a doctor. I never took antibiotics, and these are the things you go to the doctor with a severed finger, or whatever, the tip of it's cut off, or you go to the doctor, you're coughing blood. They're gonna pump you so full of antibiotics, and that's not what I ever want to do. For me personally, this is not medical advice, but personally, okay, I have done enough study of the gut microbiome and the critical importance of keeping your gut microbiome healthy that I will not take antibiotics. I will find any other way not to, and this is what I found not to take antibiotics. But that's just a couple of my personal testimonies about how blood electrification has helped me. So like I said, you could either just do it as just using the device and not doing the other 3 steps, or you could do the whole thing, and so that's really it, and it's an amazing thing. So for those of you who are prone to infections and things like that, or just want to try something that's not a bunch of pills, I don't recommend it because it's not medical advice, but this is what it would be if you decided to try it, and it's all about and this is how Bob Beck put it: take back your power. So there you go. This is the story of blood electrification. Here's the actual patent. This is Bob Beck's book that he put together. It's 42 pages of handouts that he would hand out at all of his lectures that he did. And then, basically you learn a lot more here on this site. This is where you would go. And if you wanted to buy one, if you wanted to make your own, if you're that adventurous, you can actually buy a kit from this guy. Okay, little electronic kit and solder it yourself. If not, then these guys, they're now okay, it's like 30 years later. So these guys, they're not that cheap. This is probably the best bargain for your dollar. It's $1.99 or something like that, right? And it actually does. I'll get into Hulda-Clark at another date, but it does the Clark frequencies, the Beck frequencies, and then some other frequencies, and it can do a lot more. It's got a lot more features to it, and it's about $200. If I think the current price on a silver pulsar at SOTA is under 300 or something like that. Okay, so it's a little pricier than this one. These guys they're 400 or more, so they're the most priciest, and then this one. Wow, I don't even know what this one costs. Sorry, I didn't look that up before I started this video. I don't want to hunt around while you're waiting on me, but I know that the kit when I bought it was like 35 bucks. So so the kit's not that expensive. So anyway, that's where you get it. You want to learn how to use it. There's some great videos on how to do placements. And the other thing, if you want to learn more, this is bobbeck.com or Altered States. They've got some great detail on it. The last thing I do really want to emphasize is what I mentioned earlier in my other video about the Herxheimer's effect. Okay, and so this is what happens if you use a blood electrifier on yourself, or you have a giant rat in your house that you test on, then you are going to, like the patent says, it's proven, these guys proved it, and it will kill off viruses, pathogens, fungus, whatever's in your blood. If you ever looked at blood, there's a lot of other things swimming around. There's supposed to be round things, which are your red blood cells, and big blobby things that are your white blood cells, and then that's it. but there's all this other stuff swimming around. Well, that's not supposed to be there. That's not you. Those are pathogens. The more you have a higher pathogen load, probably the sicker you are. You know, and so if you want to clean up your blood, then this is the way to do it. Hypothetically, for research purposes only. Okay, that's the way to do it. But, okay, keep in mind that where's all that going to go? If you disable, you neutralize, like your Star Trek phaser on stun, zap these things, your body has to flush them out. And if you do too much too soon, you will overload your body's ability to detox all that stuff out naturally, and it'll back you up, and you're going to get sick. And you're going to be sick from detoxing. So don't do that to yourself, and it's highly recommended that when you do this kind of thing, you do it very slow, like try 15 minutes, see what happens to you. Then go to 30 minutes and so forth. I mean, I've actually done it where I got myself up to a point where I did it for 3 months straight for like 3 or 4 hours a day after work every night. And it just, because I just had this, I went through this phase where I wanted to purify my blood. And I will tell you this, though. After doing that, and I did that several years ago, I went from having, like, I don't know, maybe 7 to 9 sick days a year, literally sick, not injured, but sick, to I haven't had any. I had maybe like 1 or 2 in the last few years. I really don't get sick. And I really attribute that to the fact that I have a very, very low pathogen load in my blood. And that's my personal testimony, not to be taken as medical advice. Boy, I can't say that enough, can I? So there you go. There's what I know, a high-level overview of blood electrification and Dr. Bob Beck. All the links are going to be in the video description. I hope you learned something. I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you very much for your time. Because, you know, there's so much out there on the web, but I'm just throwing this out there to help people. And if I can help you, that makes me happy, and that's a good karma point. So thank you for giving me karma points. But thank you so much for watching and listening to me ramble. And remember, I do these in one take. So be gentle. But thanks a lot, guys. And I really hope that this was educational and that you learned something, and maybe you'll give it a try and see what happens. All right. Aloha. Have a good day.